Hello and welcome back from the break. Just a reminder, you are in the room B and the section dedicated to cage-free and broilers. The following lecture will be presented by three speakers. These are Evans, Nathalie Söderström, and Hélène Gauche. They are all from different organizations, but at the same time, they are all from international organization Openwing Alliance. They will speak about cages to broilers and discuss if it gets any easier. Welcome, and you are free to go.
Thank you, and welcome everybody. Indeed, it's so great to be here. It's just so you know, this is a panel discussion, so that there won't be any presentation. And thank you to Humani Pokrok for organising the CARE conference this year. We're so thrilled to be here. And thank you to all of you at home for joining us today on this panel discussion. So the topic will be cages to broilers. Does it get any easier? And my name is Evans. I work as the European Corporate Relations Coordinator for the Humane League UK. And the Humane League is an international animal protection charity whose mission is to end the abuse of animals raised for food. So in my role, I meet regularly with food companies from all across Europe to discuss laying hen issues and broiler welfare issues. And I'm also really lucky that I get to work closely with our European partners across the Openwing Alliance. And today I'm joined by two leading experts on the topic of cage-free and broilers, Nathalie Söderström and Hélène Gauche. So it would be really great if both of you could perhaps tell us a little bit more about yourselves and also just introduce your organizations too.
Yes, thank you very much, Hani. So hi everyone, my name is Hélène Gauche and I work as a corporate relations and campaigns manager at L214 in France. So L214 is a French organization. It focuses its work on animals raised for food only. So we do a lot of vegan outreach with the public and with companies. We release investigations and we also partake in the cage-free and broiler campaigns. So just as Annie, I meet very regularly with food companies in France. The goal is to ask them to eradicate cages for laying hens and to eradicate the worst farming and slaughter practices for broilers as well. And I also coordinate our public campaigns towards companies. So that's when discussions have not been, let's say, enough to convince companies that they should take commitments. We launch campaigns and I also coordinate that.
Great, thank you, Hélène. And it's true that L214 are doing some really impactful campaigning and corporate outreach at the moment in France, leading to some particularly incredible commitments that have come through from the retail sector. So thank you for all of your work that you do there. And how about you, Nathalie?
Hi everyone, my name is Nathalie Söderström and I work as a corporate relations manager at Djurens Rätt in Sweden. And Djurens Rätt was founded already in the year of 1882, so we are quite old. And we are also Sweden's largest animal rights and animal welfare organization. Our aim is to make as big difference as possible for as many animals as possible. So therefore, our priorities are the animals used for animal experiments, the animals in the food industry, and in the fur production. And we also promote veganism to consumers as well as to companies. And my role is to talk to companies in the food industry about how they can make a change for egg-laying hens as well as broilers by working on welfare policies.
Thanks, Nathalie. That's so great. And it's a real pleasure and an honour to be here with two people who are continuing to work so incredibly hard to win cage-free commitments and also now working to secure European chicken commitments. So the European Chicken Commitment, also known as the ECC, I'm going to paste a link into the chat. So for those of you who aren't familiar, if you just click on that link, you can have a look at what it is that we're talking about. So it is essentially a list of 6 higher welfare criteria created by animal protection groups to improve the baseline industry welfare standards for broiler chickens. And it includes a series of demands, so things like lower stocking density, improved enrichment, and also the adoption of slower growing breeds. So yeah, please do have a look at the link for more information on this. So let's begin this panel discussion with a look at some of your work on cage-free commitments, because as we know, and as some of you may already know, the EU banned battery cages back in 2012. So why is it that there is this need to pressure companies to go cage-free? Hélène, I'll ask you first.
It's because in 1999, indeed, the European Union banned or passed a directive requiring that battery cages for laying hens should be phased out by 2012. But the problem is, instead of banning all cages, this directive only required that cages should be slightly bigger and enriched. So that's why also we call them now enriched cages. So at the time, many animal protection groups insisted that farmers should switch directly to cage-free systems, but that's not how it went. So the industry wanted to keep cages, I guess. So as a result, in many countries, farmers chose at the time to invest in new cage systems. So when the Openwing Alliance decided to start working on the cage-free issue, there was very little hope that anything could change or be obtained through legislation, because there was so many investments that had been made following that change in the law. So if cages were not yet to be banned legally, to get things moving, we had to go another way. And I guess that's why it seemed necessary to start asking companies to do their part on this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the conditions in these so-called enriched cages are awful and certainly worth continuing for us to fight for cage-free. And according to the EU Commission, there's about 47.8% of the layer flock, which equates to 198.1 million birds who are still kept in these so-called enriched cages across Europe. So still lots of work to be done for us. Nathalie, what is it that Durance rats are doing to get more hens out of cages across Europe?
We are, as well as THL and L214 and the other organizations in the Openwing Alliance, working on getting companies to go cage-free. And the reason why is because companies are able to make a lot of changes for the animals by committing to go cage-free, for example. And the Openwing Alliance have been able to get close to 1,000 commitments just in a couple of years, and it's easy to see the connection between these 1,000 commitments, more public awareness, and the decrease of hens in cages, because in 2016, almost 56% of the hens were kept in cages in Europe, and now, like you said, Annie, the number is 47.8%. And while talking about working with companies, I would also like to say that it's our role as an animal rights and animal welfare organization and our responsibility to push companies in the right direction when it comes to animal welfare. Many of the companies that we meet, they have no idea how the animals in the food industry are being treated, and we need to tell them. Otherwise, the only information they get is from the meat industry, for example. Another thing Djurens does is being a part of the campaign called the End the Cage Age, which is a European citizen initiative. The campaign is run by Compassion in World Farming, but 170 organizations took part in the campaign, and together we collected 1.5 million signatures from people who want to see an end of cages farming in Europe.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that campaign. It was a really great one. And this progress is so incredible and fills me with so much hope that we are moving to a world free from cages. And I'm sure that you will both agree that this work being done on cage-free has really prompted and probably given us a bit of a leg up, if you like, to our work on improving broiler chicken welfare, not only are we working on this as individual organisations, but we have this established coalition that we've talked about, the Openwing Alliance. And I think that as a coalition, we have really grown so much, and it's made it a lot easier for us when working on broilers. So what other things would you say that have been made easier when working on broilers as a direct consequence of your cage-free work? Hélène, how about you first?
Well, I guess the first thing is it's certainly been easier to get meetings with companies and to get the discussion going with them on broilers, because they already knew us from our cage-free work, so we didn't have to start from the beginning to get contacts and stuff like that. Even though we were not necessarily expecting that, because we had been campaigning some of them to get them to commit to cage-free. So it could have been that some companies thought, okay, they launched a campaign, I'm not going to reply to their emails on broilers. But strangely enough, actually, some of the companies that we had campaigned were the most reactive when we wrote them regarding broilers. And they were also amongst the first companies to sign the ECC in France, for instance. Not all of them, but some of them. I'm thinking of a food manufacturer, for instance, called Panzani, and a restaurant chain called Léon Bruxelles. And there was one company, we had released an investigation filmed in one of the egg supply farms at the time that hurt them like very badly at the time. And when we met with them on broilers, they actually thanked us for opening their eyes and for helping them to realize the importance of these issues. So yeah, I guess that was unexpected, but easier.
Yeah, and it's so great when you see companies recognize how important these issues are, and that these are sentient animals that have feelings and emotions. Nathalie, what's been easier for you when making the transition from cage-free work to broiler work?
Yeah, I agree with Hélène. It's been easier to get meetings with companies to discuss broilers after talking to them about going cage-free. And I think it's because they know that we are professional and that we have important information to share with them, and also information that is of a great concern to their consumers.
Yeah, absolutely. And this professional outlook that you mentioned, and something that we have is also, I'd say in some part, down to our collaboration within the Openwing Alliance. Keep talking about the Openwing Alliance, but I think generally, we do communicate better. We're more accustomed to internal procedures, so we use things like Slack. We have monthly meetings, and we also have coalition-led wide campaigns. Last year, as a coalition, we led the effective campaign against the food service giant Sodexo, and we asked them to commit to the ECC, which was through things like online actions, and we won this campaign within 4 days. And Sodexo made the commitment, so that was great. And just to give you a bit more of a background about the Openwing Alliance, or the OWA, or OWA, as it's also known to some. So the Humane League were initially working on securing cage-free commitments, but we realised then that there was just so much work to be done on this issue alone, and so founded the Openwing Alliance back in 2016. And the coalition is now built up of over 80 organisations across 64 countries and spanning 6 continents, and I'm sure some of you here today are also members of the Openwing Alliance, so hello to you all. And together we are now working on strategy and corporate outreach and campaigns for the European Chicken Commitment. Our current coalition target for broilers being Subway, and this is being fantastically led by the Albert Schweitzer Foundation in Germany. There is actually an online petition and lots of online actions which you all as activists can get involved with at home. So you can just see that more of that on the Subway Facebook campaign site. And speaking of Facebook, we do have, a huge online presence now. So I'm wondering, do you think that companies are more familiar with who we are as a coalition and how we function, and how is it that they're reacting to the broiler work that we're doing? Nathalie, I'll ask you first.
Yes, for sure. And we always make sure to share ongoing campaigns with the companies that we talk to, and also to share new commitments with them, so they know what we are doing and who we are. How they are reacting to the broiler work varies, but my opinion is that our work when it comes to broilers are more important than ever. Like I mentioned before, many companies don't know how the animals are being treated in the food industry, and this is really the case when it comes to broilers. We need to educate them here, and we need, I mean, many of them that we meet, they get surprised when they realized how the broiler industry works. But something that is a direct consequence from our cage-free work is that we most of the time know who to reach out to at the company. That's good. And maybe also which strategy that might work and who their main competitors are.
Yeah, I guess that's true. We know the companies better, and that's usually very useful to do our work on broilers. But in the meantime, sometimes thinking that we know how companies are going to react based on how they reacted during the cage-free campaign, it also backfired at some point. Because the people we are dealing with, they're not necessarily the same anymore. People change in companies, and the company also might have changed its strategy. And also they as well got familiar with how we function. So that can go both ways. And that's something we learned the hard way. So we are trying to be very careful about that now.
Yeah, absolutely. Hélène, do you think that the broiler campaign, within that, do you think that we've been overconfident?
No, I wouldn't go as far as to say that we have been overconfident. I think we are quite happy with the results we have obtained at this point. It's a difficult campaign, but in France, we got almost all retailers to sign the European Chicken Commitment. And thanks to the amazing work of the Humane League and the Openwing Alliance, all major food service companies also joined the movement for all of their activities in Europe. And that's huge. That means there's an impact for so many millions of birds every year. So even though, if I come back to France, of course, the French Producers Association is fighting the ECC, but in the same way they used to fight the cage-free movement as well. But despite that, we know that the major producers are working on the ECC for at least part of their production. And that means that the ECC is becoming a reality. And that's actually quite a progress already.
Yeah, and we are so impressed by L214's work, especially the work that you have done with the retailers. It's really incredible. And I agree with Hélène, the ECC is really becoming a reality. The Swedish Poultry Association are kind of fighting the ECC, but in the same time we see producers changing their whole production to the ECC, both in Sweden and in Europe. So even though the broiler work is harder than the cage-free work in some ways, I am also confident that this is the future. And we have also seen that companies state that this is the case in the media, where they actually say like ECC or European Chicken Commitment is the future, and we think that more companies will work on this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good point. And especially with all the producers who are committing or making pledges, it's really encouraging to see that in Sweden and also in other parts of Europe, where they're moving more quickly on this issue than they perhaps were on cage-free. So I guess from what you've both said so far, it sounds like the transition from cage-free to broilers has been a success. So I'm wondering, what would you say, if anything, has been maybe a bit more difficult? Hélène?
Well, I guess the ask itself, like the European Chicken Commitment ask, is clearly more complicated than the cage-free ask. That's for different reasons. But I guess the first reason is because the public message is not as simple or as straightforward as the Cagefree message was. The ask is a list of criteria, as you explained earlier. So it's more complicated to convey it to the public and even to companies. Yeah, it makes things really more difficult for us when we try to explain the campaign to our supporters or followers, to the media, and as I said, yeah, even to companies. So, but we have to keep in mind that the ask is more complicated because we learned from the Cagefree campaign, and for the broiler campaign, we built a stronger ask, like the ask is more precise, so it leaves less room for interpretation to companies. And it also already includes reporting and auditing criteria. So it means that it will facilitate our work afterwards. After the company takes the commitment, we don't have to work that much on follow-up and enforcement. So that's good as well, even if it means it's more complicated at the beginning. I guess another difficulty is the fact that when we started working on this, there was no ECC chicken available at all on the market. So it gave companies a very strong reason to be afraid of taking that commitment if they needed one anyway. So yeah, for them, and they told us so, it was kind of a bet on the future and on the fact that the work of animal protection groups would be enough to make new production standards emerge. Yeah, it kind of requested that they trusted how strong we are and how strong we would fight to make this possible. So that was quite different with the Cagefree work because Cagefree systems already existed in like substantial enough proportions in many countries in Europe at least. So yeah, that was another difficulty.
Yes, I agree. And another thing that's been difficult is the lack of public awareness. I have mentioned that companies don't know how animals are treated in the food industry, but when it comes to broilers, the same goes for the public, or at least it was like that a few years ago, I think, but that's changing now, luckily. Djurens Rätt, we started our awareness campaign in 2018 to change this, and we call it the 99 million, which refers to the 99 million broilers raised for meat in Sweden every year. This campaign is ongoing and our largest one ever. And I also want to say that working from almost zero momentum has been hard, but also very rewarding. It feels so cool to be a part of this movement and to look back at all the things that we have accomplished just during 2 years. And we, as in all organizations working on the ECC or the European Chicken Commitment, have over 150 commitments from companies and from producers in Europe. And we are just in the beginning of our work on broilers. So yeah, just imagine where we would be in a couple of years.
Yeah, it's really encouraging to hear that. And the campaign that you mentioned, the 99 million campaign led by Djurens Rätt, is so successful, and I think raising public awareness is such an important part of what we do. And yeah, indeed, we've come such a long way from the beginning of our broiler work, and we've learnt so much along this journey. But that said, I think in hindsight, there are probably some elements that we could have done differently. So is there anything that sort of stands out to you that you would have done differently before starting out your work on the European Chicken Commitment?
I guess one thing that would have been helpful would have been to get other organizations involved, including outside of the animal protection bubble. That would have clearly strengthened the ask, and it would have helped to avoid the classic like farmers, animal protection, NGOs confrontation. It's also because some of the arguments that we get from companies are actually about the higher environment, or the supposedly higher environmental impact of the ECC chicken, and it's maybe the most difficult argument to counter. So I guess it would have been very helpful if we had involved environmental organizations from the beginning to help us build a stronger case on that matter.
Yeah, I agree. Another thing that maybe we should have focused more on is how we as an organization can talk about the ECC so it makes sense to the public, so that the public understands why it's important that companies work with the ECC and what it actually means for the animals. And one good example here is what the Dutch organization Wakker Dier did. They came up with the term plofkip, meaning exploded or exploding chicken, which is a term for the worst poultry farming, and also a term that everyone understands is something bad and something that we need to change. So it's now something recognizable by the industry as well as the consumers. So yeah, we are now looking at similar terminology that would have the same impact.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think not only, unlike with the cage-free terminology, is there this lack of public connection with the terminology around exploding chickens. There's also no legislation for the ECC. There's no legislation for the European Chicken Commitment, like there was with the cage-free egg status. So in that respect, it's been more challenging on the communication side. However, I am hopeful, I'm very optimistic that the momentum that we are seeing amongst company commitments to the ECC, as you mentioned previously, we have over 150 commitments. And I think our progress towards achieving something legislative is only becoming stronger. So talking about legislation, do you see the European Chicken Commitment being more on the political agenda over the next 5 years?
Yeah, I hope so. In Sweden, we are already doing some political lobbying regarding parts of the ECC. For example, we want to see a ban on electrical stunning.
That's great, and yeah, definitely a step in the right direction. So what other things do you see as an area of focus for corporate commitment work over the next 5 years, say, Hélène?
Well, obviously, one of our priorities will be to continue working on getting more commitments on broilers and targeting different sectors in order to make sure that the European Chicken Commitment will indeed be the minimum standard for chickens by 2026 all over Europe.
Yeah, and the same goes for us, and also enforcing commitments, meaning that we need to make sure that the companies do what they have promised. And we at Djurens we started to do this already when it comes to the cage-free work in Sweden, since the timeline for companies to go cage-free here are a bit shorter than in the rest of Europe. So most companies here will go cage-free this year or the next. So it's really good to see that companies do make the transition and that they also report about it. So we hope this can be a good example in other countries and also for other organizations working on the issue. But we will be busy getting more ECC commitments and enforcing them for sure. And like we mentioned before, it's helpful also that annual reporting is a part of the European Chicken Commitment, which reminds companies that they need to be working on the issue.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thanks, Nathalie, and thanks, Hélène. And as you mentioned, as organisations, you know, we're not going to be going anywhere over the coming years. We're going to be busy. We're going to continue to push for company commitments across all of the sectors. And something else which we hope to see over the coming years is something more of a wider and a more global presence of increasing baseline welfare standards for chickens, which is something we've seen already for caged hens. And so, you know, this could see the development of something like a global better chicken commitment. And, you know, I think from everything that both of you have outlined today, that we can confidently say that our cage-free experience has made it easier for the broiler campaign, and we're confident that this will help our work on the next campaign and in the future. So yeah, that's everything. Thank you for listening. Great to see you all, and we welcome any questions that you might have.
Okay, so thank you for the very interesting discussion and for panel talk. Now on to the questions. Let me just see. Okay, there are quite a lot. Okay, so let's just start with this one. Okay, do you think other animal movements, for example, pigs, fish, etc., could benefit from an alliance like this?
I would say yes, absolutely. I think often within the animal movement there can be some divide and some disagreements, and I think it's a really powerful tool to have the backing of like lots of different organizations coming together to say, look, these are some standards that we all agree on, and this is something that you know, you should be working on and that companies should be committing to. I think with fish, for example, I think there's something already that's being established, which is so great. So yeah, it'd be really, really wonderful to see something similar for this for other animals in the future.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, what do you think are the key skills that allow you to achieve the impact that you do?
Hélène, Nathalie, do you want to answer that one?
It's difficult. Yeah, you go ahead, Hélène.
No, I was going to say the same. It's a very difficult question. I guess I'm not sure we can talk about skills. I mean, with the Openwing Alliance, we kind of, even though we take into account the differences between countries and like the cultural differences and stuff like that, but still we kind of developed a way of doing things and working on this. So I guess that's really what is the most important on that issue, on like having the impact that we managed to have. Then of course, depending on your organization, some things can make things easier for you. Again, it's not about skills, but if you have like lots of volunteers to do actions on the ground, that will be helpful. Yeah, I suppose it's mostly about things like that. Maybe if you want to add something, Annie or Nathalie.
I think you covered it. Yeah, yes, I agree. Yeah, to be able to keep the pressure on, to pressure companies to do what we ask them to. That's a good thing also. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for the answers. The next question is, what are the benefits of working as an alliance on these issues?
Well, I would say that I think it shows that we are more aligned on these things, as I said previously, and also it's really cool, to be honest. Like, it's really cool to get to work with different organizations, learn from other organizations, just this sort of collaborative spirit, which does help. You know, it really brings like a positive note to the work that we're doing, which can be very challenging and difficult at times. And you know, kind of when we're doing coalition-led campaigns and things like that, we do pull together all of our resources, and you know, everybody, not just within corporate relations, which myself and Hélène and Nathalie work together in, but you know, campaigns, communications, you know, all different members of teams get involved, and so it's a really positive thing to be a part of, and a huge benefit, I think.
Okay, thank you for your answer. Another question reads, is it hard to ensure companies are held accountable to make the changes they're committed to?
Nathalie, do you want? I know you've been doing some more enforcement work. Do you think you've got? more of an idea?
Yeah, I mean, in Sweden, there are a lot of cage-free eggs at the moment. We don't have that many hens in cages, 8%. Yeah, I guess that has been a bit more easy maybe for us to enforce commitments here when it comes to the cage-free work. But yeah, I think that's also making sure that companies get some positivity from us when they commit to going cage-free. It's also making it easier to make them report about it. Like they are proud that they have become cage-free 100%. So I guess, yeah, it's hard, but it's possible for sure. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. How do you go about enforcement of the ECC?
Well, as we very briefly said during the talk, for the ECC it's a bit easier since it's already kind of included in the ask. So companies that sign the ECC, they have to publish a reporting every year on their progress, and then after they've made the commitment 100%, they will have to audit and publish the results of their audit. So it's going to be easier compared to the cage-free enforcement work that we are doing now, because this was not included in the ask at first. And we can see now that we already have some companies that took the ECC like more than 1 year ago and that started publishing their progress reports. For instance, we have Danone, I forget, I know we have others, but I don't have all their names in mind. But it's starting to, like, we can start to see the first results and the first progress, which is also very encouraging. And yeah, it's easier now to go back to companies and tell them, like, you signed this commitment, so you have to report on your progress. It's easier to do that because it's in the commitments compared to the cage-free ask. It wasn't there, so now we have to go back to them and explain, we would like you to report on this. So yeah, all in all, I'd say that's what's going to be easier with the ECC. It's the enforcement part, I guess.
Okay, thank you. Another one is, how did you stay motivated in the early days of corporate outreach on the ECC? So before there was a momentum.
I think that was one of the it's one of the great things with the Openwing Alliance, that we can see that things are happening in other countries. So even if something is not happening here, for example, we see that things are happening somewhere else, and then it's really motivated, and we can share that information also with the companies that we talk to. So yeah, I think that's what we did anyway. Yeah.
I guess as well the fact that we managed to already achieve something on the cage-free issue, it helped a lot to keep us motivating. Again, it was not the same since we had no momentum, and it's like the situation was different, but still we knew that we kind of already did something similar. So now it was a bit maybe more complicated, but I think it helped a lot.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, are there examples of companies who are on the track to make their ECC and reporting transparently?
Yeah, that's a great question. And as Hélène mentioned earlier, there are a few companies that are already reporting. KFC, who committed last year in July, they just published their annual report just a couple of weeks ago, and it is very transparent. They're not sort of holding back on anything, and whilst it does show that there's still progress to be made, there's still, and they admit that in the report. They're saying, like, we still have got a lot of areas that we need to work on. In the report, they're actually kind of encouraging others and other companies, not just within the food service sector, but also like the retailers, to get on board with this. And yeah, it's really encouraging that companies are willing to do that, and also encouraging other companies to do the same and to follow suit. So I think if you want to see like a good example of a sort of transparent report, thanks Matthew's just posted it in the chat. Yeah, the KFC report is a good one to have a look at.
Okay, thank you. And then we have a last question, which is kind of for you to repeat something. So I think we have some time. So can you please repeat the part about using special terminology, please?
Yeah, sure. Just a second. Yeah, we talked about that the Dutch organization Wakker Dier, they have a terminology. Is it that one? I think that they're asking about. Yeah, but anyway, they developed a term called the plofkip, meaning exploding chicken. So they use it when they are talking to the public about European chicken commitment and yeah, the worst of poultry farming. So we are now trying to find a similar terminology that we can use by talking about it to the public. I hope that was an answer. Yeah.
I hope so too. Okay, thank you for your answer. And this was the last question. So if nobody else has anything to ask or to say, you can, if you don't want to go to Slido, you can just ask in the chat if you think it's quicker. But if there isn't anything, or if there isn't anything to say, then I think that I should thank you for your presentation and for your talk.